Imagine the salty spray of the Pacific Ocean stinging your face as you cling to the splintered edge of a lifeboat miles away from land, with nothing but horizon and despair stretching before you. Your heart races as the chill of night creeps in, every wave crashing against the fragile vessel, a reminder of your isolation and impending doom. In the distance, the fading sun casts an eerie orange glow over the water, but it offers no warmth, only a promise of the freezing darkness that soon envelops you. Tonight, we are looking at a story of desperation, resilience, and the haunting spectre of survival against the odds. In 1820, the whaling ship Essex, once a proud vessel of the Nantucket fleet, became a ghost, swallowed whole by the monstrous force of nature itself after a harrowing encounter with a sperm whale. The aftermath of the wreck unleashed a nightmare upon its crew, who were cast adrift in lifeboats, grappling with the vastness of the unforgiving ocean and their own deteriorating humanity. As the sun sank lower, it marked not just the end of the day, but the beginning of a struggle against the elements, hunger, and the darkness that seeped into their very souls. Amidst the turmoil, the crew was forced to confront not only the shifting tides and bleak food supplies, but also the primal instinct for survival that would drive men to unimaginable acts. Their plight would reveal the deepest recesses of fear and desperation, as hope faded like the evening light. The Essex's heartbreaking journey has echoed through history, a tale woven into the fabric of maritime lore. It is a grim reminder of the fragility of life at sea and the thin veneer of civilization that covers our darker instincts. Join us as we explore this harrowing saga, where camaraderie and chaos collide, and the true cost of survival becomes chillingly evident. This is Left to Die, the Wreck of the Essex. Chapter 2. The Collision. A whale strikes. The morning air is sharp. It bites at exposed skin, leaving behind a pinching sting. The crew of the Essex can feel the pressure in the atmosphere, a calm before a storm, though no one can tell what's coming. They gather on deck, stretching their limbs as they catch the sunrise. Hues of orange and purple dance on the horizon, reflecting off the dark waters. The smell of salt hangs in the air, mingling with the dampness of the ocean. It's a day like any other at sea, or so they think. Look at how smooth the water is, Tom whispers to his mate James, his voice barely rising above the gentle lapping of the waves. Feels like a trap. James nods, unease shadowing his features. Just wait until the wind picks up, he replies, tightening the grip on his harpoon. He's seen it too, those eerie still moments when the ocean holds its breath, harboring something monstrous beneath. As the sun climbs higher, the crew goes through the day's routines. Whales loom on the horizon. They are the prey, and yet the thought of what lies beneath never quite settles. Each man is lost in his thoughts, unaware that fate awaits just below the surface, beneath a placid facade that cloaks a predator. And then it happens. A chilling splash. The water erupts as a massive shape breaches. It's a sperm whale, gleaming in the sunlight, large and powerful. Its tail curls high above the water, revealing a glistening surface before it plunges back into the depths. "Look!" comes a shout, one of exhilaration and terror intertwined. Men scramble on deck, eyes wide with both awe and caution. They've come to harvest, but the true nature of the beast is only beginning to unfold. Without warning, the ocean roars as the great creature charges straight for the ship. The Essex trembles beneath their feet. "Hold on," Captain Pollard bellows. Panic erupts, drowning out the captain's command. Wood groans, and the deep resonating impact of flesh against hull shakes the crew to their core. A thunderous crash. The ship buckles violently. Seawater gushes in through the splintered wood, flooding the lower decks. "Man overboard," someone shouts, but it's drowned in the cacophony. "Get to the pumps," Pollard shouts, urgency cutting through the panic. The men stumble, slipping on the slick surface, their hearts racing as they fight against the chaos. Water sprays up, cold and biting, as they scramble to stem the tide. Hoses and buckets are grabbed in desperation, fingers fumbling in a frenzied rush. The stench of brine and blood rends the air, a thick metallic odor that mingles with the sour sweat of fear. "Tom, stay with me," James yells. Panic is lacing his voice as he pushes through the chaos. They work side by side, hands moving almost mechanically, yet paralyzed by the dread pooling in their stomachs. How long until the ship goes under? "Captain, we can't hold it," a voice calls from the gloomy depths of the hold. The moisture wraps around them like a shroud, thickening the air and pressing down on their chests. But Captain Pollard's resolve is unyielding. "We'll not go down without a fight," he bellows. His voice carries the weight of authority, yet doubt flickers in his eyes as he surveys the damage. The men toil on, heartbeats pounding like war drums against the bedlam. Time separates into fragments. They are caught in a rapid tide of confusion. The ship begins to list dangerously, the angle of the deck proving treacherous. "Get to the lifeboats," comes another order, rasping through the chaos. "We need to abandon ship." But even as the command is issued, the weight of reality sinks in. Hope dims like the flicker of a turning lantern. The Essex is their home. Its cabin walls have heard laughter. Its sails have carried their dreams. Leaving it behind feels like tearing away a piece of their own souls. "James, what do we do? We can't just—" "Grab your gear," he snaps, breaking through Tom's paralysis. "We have to go now, or we'll drown here." With throbbing hearts, they race to the lifeboats, but the boat is already listing. Water pours in, cold and relentless. The dark churns beneath, a monster awakened, pulling at their ankles. The men reach the small boats, frantic hands slapping against the side, each struggling to haul themselves out before the ship is swallowed. "Row, damn it, row!" someone screams as the first boat launches shakily into the waves. The water sloshes around them, and they push off hard, desperate to get away from the wreckage. But it's not over yet. The distance feels impossible as the Essex groans under the weight of its fate. Poles shift, creaking in protest, and another violent lurch sends men sprawling. James hollers for Tom, but the din of the chaos swallows everything. "Forget him! We need to get clear!" someone barks, pulling on the oars with frantic energy. Yet the terror of the open sea slips in, clinging to their throats. "This isn't happening," Tom mutters to himself. "We'll turn back. We have to turn back." Will they ever see land again, or is this just the beginning, the horrific prelude to a slaughter? The last ships of the Essex shudder like leaves caught in a tempest. The echoes of the disaster swell around them. Each shout, each scream, a melody of despair. "What do we do?" is the last thing Tom hears before it all fades into the darkness. Over the cacophony of panic, against the backdrop of the endless ocean, hope is a fragile thing, quickly sinking. The Essex is going down. All that they've known is being devoured alive. And in the depths of the water beneath, the whale circles, waiting. What else lurks below the surface, ready to confront a crew left to die? Adrift at sea, the initial struggle. The ocean stretches infinitely, a vast, indifferent expanse of blue and grey. Each wave slaps against the side of the lifeboat, sending sprays of salt water into the air. With each splash, the reality of their situation sinks deeper. They are mere specks on the surface of a merciless sea. The sun beats down relentlessly, turning the lifeboats into ovens. Heat radiates from the wood, scorching the skin. Thirst clings to them like a shroud. A dry whisper fills the air. How long until we find land? It's a question nobody wants to answer. In the first days, camaraderie flickers briefly. Men share rations. They pass around what little water they have, each sip a bittersweet reminder of their plight. "Take smaller gulps, or we'll all be dead before we reach the next island," Owen whispers, his sunburned lips cracking as he speaks. But morale is slippery. It ebbs and flows with the tide. Mark, sitting hunched over, wrings out his shirt, letting the brine drip between his fingers. "We can't keep this up," he mutters, his eyes scanning the horizon for a sign. Any sign. But all he sees is the merciless blue. Days blur into one another. Time becomes meaningless in this endless drifting. Every dawn is engulfed in tired hope. Every dusk is heavy with despair. At night, the cold seeps into their bones. Ocean spray turns into a biting chill, and they huddle together in their lifeboats, bodies pressed tight, a futile attempt to share warmth against the encroaching dark. What food they have left is scant, the last scraps of salted meat playing tricks on their minds. The thought of letting even a scrap sit too long becomes maddening. "You'll waste away," Charles warns, his voice low and strained. "Make it last. We'll live to see land yet." But Charles sounds like he is trying to convince himself. Starvation sets in quickly. Their stomachs gnaw with hunger, a constant reminder of their dire situation. The skin on their faces tightens, eyes hollow, they stop laughing. Creatures of the sea tease them from beneath the water's surface, darting just out of reach of their desperate hands. Fish, sleek and nimble, mocking their plight. Nighttime brings a new torment. They listen to the waves, each one crashing against their fragile boats, each whispering dark promises. Sleep comes in snatches, interrupted by nightmares that claw at their throats. "What if we never find land?" A voice trembles in the dark, its leech, usually robust, now quaking. "What if we're just fishing bait?" Ominous thoughts settle in among the crew. Paranoia begins to sink in like a weight. They are isolated, drifting away from civilization, and that sense of distance breeds fear. Someone's shadow lingers in the gloom, a ghost of despair that gnaws at their souls. Then there's the laughter. It erupts randomly, a desperate sound escaping someone's lips, mingled with the salty wind. "It'll be a tale to tell," one of the men coughs, trying to lighten the mood. "The Essex and the men lost to the sea." But the laughter dies as quickly as it springs to life, the reality crashing back in like a rogue wave. Rationing food becomes a tense exercise in survival. They watch each other closely, eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You took more than your share," Owen accuses. "You think I'm not watching?" Tension crackles in the air. Hunger, despair, and distrust, all roiling beneath the surface. Each day, they discuss their dwindling options. Should they row, strive for land, or steer for some distant hope? "If we go that way," Mark points towards a cloudy horizon. "No, we'd be sailing into more uncertainty," interrupts Charles. The fight underneath their ragged discussions is one of desperation. They become less like brothers and more like competitors, each clinging to a shadow of hope. Days drag on, and soon they start feeling the acute effects of starvation. Crooked fingers grasp at empty bellies. The sun bakes their skin into a resilient, blistering mask. Days of drifting turn into a nightmare of sleeplessness and hunger that gnaws away at them, an ever-present spectre. The sun hangs lower and lower each day. Shadows spill across the water like ink bleeding into parchment. Hours turn to days, and water becomes an obsession. Tomorrow, they say, we'll find more. But tomorrow brings only hot sun and empty jars. Mark makes a suggestion one evening, a tone of dread infusing his voice. "We could," he hesitates, "we could ration the others' shares too. It's an option." The air thickens. A palpable fear settles over them. The quiet hangs heavy. The possibility looms like a storm cloud. Night falls like a guillotine, cutting off the light from the horizon. A cold wind sweeps through the boats, making the air sharp and biting. Soft murmurs rise among the men. "We can't be thinking like that," one insists, but the whisper thrums in the air, crackling. Desperation brings ideas that chill the soul. Then there's a shift. A sound stirs them from their uneasy slumber. "What's that?" Owen's voice rises, low and tremulous. They listen, hearts pounding in unison. In the shifting shadows, something moves in the water alongside them. The fear is tangible. "It's just fish," Charles reassures, trying to rein in the growing panic. But their eyes betray him. Anxiety hangs like storm clouds above their heads. Hungry, desperate, they watch the gloom circle them like predators, waiting for the moment to strike. What if... One voice breaks the trepidation, a murmur of possibility that sinks into the dark. It is a dread thought, yet it lingers. What if they are not the only ones vying for survival? As they float into yet another night, the spectre of their dwindling hope looms larger than before. Stars twinkle like distant promises, but the ocean remains an indifferent master. "What will become of us?" whispers one man. It's a question unanswered, hanging like looming sails, heavy with the promise or threat of a drifting fate. The sea is relentless, ever watching, and within its depths something stirs. Would they collapse under the weight of their choices, or would they succumb to the very thing they swore they would never consider? Would the bonds of brotherhood shatter like glass under pressure? The lifeboats sway gently, a small discomfort against the vast, potent unknown. What lies ahead, where the sea meets despair? A moment trembles in the air, and then, suddenly, a shriek cuts through the night. The sound echoes, reverberating against the waves and their fragile sanity. Look, something's coming. The horizon trembles with dark promise, and the men lean forward, breath held, hearts racing. What will rise from the depths? What horror awaits them? The sun dips below the waves, and with it, their perception of hope shifts. It's in the waiting that fear finds its power. What is coming is certainly more than they bargained for. Chapter 4. Rationing and Desperation. A fight for survival. The sun hangs low in the leaden sky, a pale disk barely breaking through the murky clouds. The wind bites, a cruel reminder that they are adrift, isolated and fast running out of time. The smell of salt water mingles with the stench of sweat and despair, filling the small lifeboat with an oppressive tang. Inside the vessel, a fragile optimism clings to the crew like the last vestiges of warmth. Each man stares into the distance, the horizon blurring with the swell of waves. They can barely remember the bounty of the Essex, now a fleeting ghost of the past, haunting their thoughts. "How long till we see land again?" one speaks, his voice rough, the words scraping against his throat. He shifts uneasily, feeling the gnawing emptiness in his belly. His name is Franklin, a young man with sunken cheeks and a flicker of resolve, still trying to dance behind his weary eyes. Tom, his companion, shakes his head. "Days, weeks, who knows? We'll stretch what we have. We have 2. His tone is steady, but the fear behind his words is palpable. There's an unvoiced agreement among the men. They will ration whatever food is left, a necessity that quickly turns into a torturous game of survival. The small supplies, hardtack now stale and crumbling, lie at the center of their shared space like a shrine to their fading fortunes. Each man gazes at the remaining biscuits, each one a bitter reminder of what once was. The wheat flour crackers absorb every drop of moisture in the air, their edges sharp and unyielding. They savor the meager rations, counting the calories like a currency they cannot afford to waste. 2 a day, and when the water runs dry, Captain Pollard announces, his voice steady but tight, "We'll drink less. It's either that or we starve." The men nod in agreement, the weight of his words sinking into their hearts. Days stretch into an indistinguishable blur, each one marked by the rising and falling of the sun. The elements are relentless. The cold penetrates their skin, chilling their bones, while the sun glaring above invites relentless burning on unprotected skin. The men are exhausted. They feel it in their muscles, in their empty stomachs. Each wave crashing against the lifeboat jostles them, a harsh reminder of their predicament. Evenings bring a special dread as twilight descends. The thoughts circling their minds turn darker, like shadows falling over their faces. Conversations fade into silence, laughter lost to the howling wind. Hope, once a flickering flame, dims to a barely flickering ember. "Can you hear that?" Franklin asks one night, breaking the stillness. A hollow emptiness surrounds them, the creaking of wood the only reply. "I think the ocean is calling. It wants us." A shiver runs through the men, an unspoken understanding settling over them. Dread seeps into their bones, curling like fog around their fragile hope. The air grows thick with fear. Tom clenches his fists, attempting to stave off the spiraling despair. If we can just hold on, there's still a chance, he murmurs, his voice barely a whisper. But the truth is undeniable. Each man feels his body weakening, flesh draining from their bones. The boys once filled with youthful vigor now stand gaunt, their eyes hollow pools of anguish. Each belly grumbles with hunger, muffled groans in the dark. The water supply dwindles too. The last precious drops run dry, turning parched mouths into desolate sands. The men share the scant amount left, a wait that stretches agonizingly long each time they take sips, hoping, praying it will last just a moment longer. Rations are down to nothing, Tom states, his voice trembling, eyes darting nervously among his companions. He hesitates, then pushes on. We can't afford to waste anything, not even the dregs. He forces a smile, but it cracks like ice beneath their raw need. As they look at one another, the reality sinks in. Survival at sea means making impossible choices. The spectre of starvation looms like a storm cloud, darker than the endless night surrounding them. The camaraderie that once defined their voyage transforms into a silent competition, each man's sole focus shifting to his own survival. "I saw a fish jump yesterday," Franklin bursts out suddenly, the spark of hope igniting. "If we can just catch one, we—" "Stop it," Tom snaps, fear nested in his voice. "We've no gear to fish with. If you're counting on the ocean to save us, we're done for." Silence fills the boat, thick and suffocating. The crashing waves grow louder, mocking their desperation. Somewhere deep inside, every man begins to wonder what it means to truly survive. Will they resort to primal instincts, to desperate measures they once thought abhorrent? As dawn breaks another day, desolation sets in. Franklin, now pale and trembling, clasps his stomach as he bows over the side of the boat, retching against the railing. The salty spray stings his cracked lips. The taste of bile is bitter and acrid. He wipes his mouth weakly and looks up to see Tom watching him, a hardness in his gaze now. "We can survive this." Tom's voice is firm, yet it wavers. Beside him, Captain Pollard seems to hear something others do not, a finality in his silence. With every passing hour, despair consumes what little spirit remains. The men strip the lifeboat of all non-essentials, searching for anything, a shard of wood, a scrap of sail, that can be transformed into something useful. They hold their breaths, hoping to turn the tide, but each effort feels like throwing stones into an abyss. Franklin sets his jaw. "We need to speak of our plans for what comes next. We cannot keep avoiding this." The unspoken truth hangs heavily in the air, suffocating in its own way. "What comes next?" Captain Pollard echoes. "Do you think there's something left to eat? All we have left are bones." But there, in the dark, amidst their dwindling hope and anguish, Franklin's eyes glow with a fierce determination. "We are men made for difficult choices. I know we can find a way." A conversation springs up, haltingly at first, each word infused with desperation, but wrapped in a fragile cloak of resolve. They talk about options, slivers of plans, not just to survive, but to find a way back. The voices grow steadier, but each man's heart quickens as they realize what lies at the edge of their thoughts, poised to spill over into reality. What would they do when rations run low? The thought hangs in the air, an unlooked-for spectre tightening around their throats. They all know the tales of survival at sea. They know the stories whispered, of choices made when hunger becomes unbearable, when limbs grow weak. The options that lie ahead weave together threads of horror and survival. As the light dims after sunset, the darkness feels like a weight settling over them. Each man grapples silently with his morality, fear pulsating in their chests. Could they really be left with no choice? A low voice cuts through. "We must prepare for the worst, whatever that might be," Tom states, his voice carrying the weight of what sits uneasily in their hearts. His words, muffled, trembling, reach into the belly of the boat, sinking into the minds of the men, each still voicing their hope for rescue, even as the blackness creeps closer. The tension crackles like static in the air. Anchored by fear and desperation, They look at one another, marking the moment when survival morphs into something darker, something primal. An invisible line crossed, and in that breathless silence, they realize they will have to confront their own humanity in ways they have never expected. Can they cling to hope, or will the sea, vast and unforgiving, strip them of everything they once were? As they sit in that small boat, clinging to each other, the cold night pressing them into a tighter circle, the chilling ocean whispers a question that none are ready to answer. What sacrifices will they make in the name of survival? The answer seems to loom in the shadows, waiting to be unearthed. The stakes have never been higher, the path ahead an uncertain horror. The flicker of desperation blinds them, a doubt clawing at the edges of every man's mind. What will they become in the wake of unending hunger? With their hopes tethered to a hope they can't name, a weight of dread settles deeper into their bones. And as darkness envelops them, the thunderous call of the sea murmurs its dreadful promise. The fight for survival has only just begun. Chapter 5. The Call of Nature, Choosing to Survive. The ocean stretches endlessly, a vast and indifferent expanse. The sun beats down, relentless and cruel. The sailing vessel Essex, once a proud whaling ship, now drifts aimlessly. It is an iron coffin on an endless sea. Each morning, the faces of the crew appear more haggard, hollow cheeks, sunken eyes. Hope dwindles like the dwindling rations that once seemed enough. "It's not just the hunger, is it?" Thomas says, his voice low, almost swallowed by the wind. Charles, beside him, shakes his head. It's the waiting. Their breaths mingle in the stale air. Swallowed by silence, they contemplate the grotesque disease of desperation creeping into their minds. Days pass in a haze of fatigue and gnawing hunger. They scan the horizon for sails, for a miracle, for anything that will break the monotony of dread. But the ocean keeps its secrets close. The salt water burns their cracked lips. Each drop of sweat feels like a sacrifice. The supplies had plummeted. On a good day, a few ounces of stale bread. On a bad day, nothing at all. "We need to consider our options," Captain Pollard states, his voice steady but laced with fear. The crew nods, though dread hangs in the air, thicker than the salt spray. Thoughts drift to the last meal they had, shared. Just one fish, slimy and bloodied, a far cry from the lavish dinners they had once enjoyed back home. As night falls, darkness wraps around them. It robs them of warmth, casting long shadows that twist like the thoughts in their minds. The small boat rocks gently, each movement a reminder of their isolation. The stars feel far away. "I'm not going to suggest anything yet," Charles whispers, glancing at Thomas. His face is pale, disturbed. But we can't ignore it any longer. The unspoken idea hangs in the air, thick and suffocating. On the fifth night, they gather for a grim meeting. Lantern light flickers against their gaunt faces, illuminating a mix of fear and resignation. "Listen," Captain Pollard begins, his throat dry, words brittle. "We're in a dire situation." A few men exchange glances, a brief flash of understanding. They feel it, the creeping despair that gnaws at their sanity. "Is it time?" Silas dares to ask, breaking the silence. His hands tremble. The shadows seem to curl around him, desperate to pull him into their dark embrace. The murmurs of agreement are quiet, but they build momentum. There's a storm brewing, and it's not just outside. A treacherous thing stirs within. "You're talking about murder," one of the greenhorns protests, his voice a rasp, quaking with disbelief. "We can't do that." Another crewman, Jacob, breaks in. "And yet, we might have to. What do you propose? Sitting here until we starve? That's madness." His tone is icy, devoid of pity. A palpable tension hangs in the air as they begin to weigh their options. Visions of families and homes flash through their minds, but so does the gnawing hunger clawing at their insides. Time slips like sand through their fingers. Fear melds with hunger until it becomes indistinguishable. They talk of awful things, as if speaking them aloud will somehow brand them as unholy. But what if it's one of us? What if... Charles stops short, the implications cold as seawater. The room shivers, a deep chill creeping into their bones, despite the heat of the lanterns. They are caught in the web of survival and morality, the ultimate test of their humanity. In the darkness, a resolve settles over them like a wet blanket. If we choose to act, we must choose wisely, Captain Pollard cautions, trying to hold on to the last vestiges of decency. We cannot let fear destroy us. The discussions continue, voices rising and falling like the waves outside. Arguments flare, accusations swirl, tensions escalate, born from the depths of fraying psyches and an insatiable hunger. Each heartbeat echoes louder, each word a desperate gasp for sanity. A little while later, Tom finds himself on a worn wooden bench below deck. He clutches a rusted knife. Sweat beads on his forehead, a visceral reminder of the situation they face. The blade glints in the dim light. It feels heavy in his hand, imbued with fate. Outside, the ocean moans like a beast hungry for their souls. I never thought it would come to this, he murmurs to himself, not realizing he has company. Matthew, one of the older crewmen, shifts nearby. His voice is raw, but grounded. None of us did, but nature doesn't care for our morals. Tom hears the truth in that statement. The hairs on his arms prick, cold winds blowing through the cracks of the ship. With each gust, the pangs of hunger twist in his gut, more insistent, more violent. Days fade into a blurring desperation. Then, the unthinkable happens. The crew grapples with the decision as they move further into the depths of starvation. The reality sets in. The horror of what lies ahead is more unbearable than leaving their humanity behind. We'll need to draw straws, Captain Pollard finally says, steeling himself. The men shudder at the notion. Drawing straws is sinister, a fool's game for those still clinging to their decency. Or else we won't survive, Charles counters, gritting his teeth. His gaze hardens, a flicker of something primal igniting behind his tired eyes. We can't afford to hesitate. They stare at the captain, their leader, as he raises his hand. The decision hovers like a guillotine. No one speaks, but the silence thunderclaps with the unspoken agreement that lingers thick in the air. As they gather to draw straws, the weight of their act presses down on them, an unbearable heaviness. Each man knows they are teetering on the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss of the most gruesome choice of survival. What happens next will shatter their unity, and perhaps their souls. Who among them will answer the call of nature, and at what cost? And as the first straw is drawn, the ship creaks ominously, the ocean crashing against the hull. The wave of cold fear washes over them, drowning their last shreds of humanity. Will they be able to face the horrific path before them? Will they emerge from this nightmare? Or will they simply become part of the legend, forever lost at sea? As the first blade of fate is drawn, the lantern flickers, casting shadows of trepidation upon their faces. The answer lies just within grasp, yet terrifyingly out of reach. Chapter 6. Confronting the Elements. Harsh Conditions. The sun rises over the horizon, diffused and brutal. Its rays slice through the early morning mist, an insistent reminder of the reality the survivors of the Essex face. Heat, desperation. The ocean stretches infinitely in front of them, shimmering like broken glass. The temperature climbs, burning the skin exposed to its vicious embrace. Men squint against the light, their parched lips cracked like dried earth. Every drop of sweat feels sacred, a mirage of survival in the relentless sun. "We're baking alive," one mutters, his voice almost lost to the sound of waves lapping against the lifeboats. They cling to the flimsy wood under them, a makeshift raft of hope drifting toward despair. The roar of the ocean is omnipresent, a beast they cannot combat, a predator circling in closer. It's a quiet terror that sits on their shoulders, heavy and suffocating. Fellow survivors share furtive glances, faces lined with fear and doubt. They don't speak of the storm brewing inside them. As hunger gnaws at their insides, it is the weeping winds that truly unsettle them. What if the rain comes? Whispers one man, his voice trembling. The wind picks up, sending shudders across the makeshift vessels, teasing a foreboding promise of storms. The air sense of salt and despair, mingling with the sweat on their skins. It's only water, another replies, but the edge of hysteria is clear in his eyes. Water they crave, water that can become their grave. As night falls, the sky darkens with ominous clouds, brooding and thick. The ocean, previously calm, rumbles beneath the surface. Tension crackles like static in the air. They pull their tattered clothes tighter against their bodies, shivering in a sudden chill that swells as the sun vanishes. Roaring thunder rolls across the expanse above them. The survivors brace themselves, feeling the turbulent energy pull taut around their chest. "Get ready," shouts a leader, his voice a war cry against the impending chaos. Raindrops the size of coins begin to fall, each a frigid slap against their skin. A cacophony erupts as the water drums against battered wood. The lifeboats are unprepared for such fury, thrashing like wild beasts trying to break free. "Hold on," someone yells as the roar of the storm drowns them. Lightning splits the night sky, a searing flash that reveals their desperate faces, twisted, hollow, haunted. In that heartbeat of illumination, they see their plight, men battered and broken, adrift in a vast expanse of uncertainty. The waves crash around them, knocking one man overboard. It happens in a blink. 1 second, he is there. The next, he's gone. "No, come back." Panic ignites in their hearts, their screams swallowed by the storm. He is lost to the maw of the ocean, mere yards from their limbs, fighting against a fierce tide that hurls him farther away. They cling to the boat, knuckles white, as rain pours relentlessly. Each burst stings like needles piercing bare skin. It is a violent baptism, connecting them to the depths they fear. They are drenched now, soaked to the bone. The salt and rain mingle, blurring the lines of suffering. In this chaos, a man loses his footing and is thrown from the edge. "Grab him!" someone hollers, but the swirling abyss grips him, pulling him down. The realization radiates through the group. The ocean is not just a source of life, but a fierce adversary. Hours crawl by, a slow death beneath a violent sky. They hold on through the dread, their bodies shaking uncontrollably from cold, fear, and dread. They dumbly talk amongst themselves, trying to convince one another that dawn will come. "We'll be all right," one says, a quiver in his voice, but even he isn't sure. As the storm rages, one lad, his youthful bravado long gone, murmurs, "I can't do this anymore." He looks at the men, eyes wide with hopelessness. What if we just let it take us? The question hangs in the torrid air, heavy and still, in stark contrast to the chaos around them. Morning light breaks like an apology, peeking through the retreating clouds, revealing their battered forms. Exhausted, they lie back against the cold, cruel wood of the boat. But the relief is short-lived. The storm leaves in its wake more than exhaustion. It leaves a sense of futility they cannot shake. Starvation gnaws even more aggressively now. As shadows linger longer than the sun, their bodies become exposed to not only the elements but to one another. Conversations turn ragged. Whispers of fear morph into despair and accusations. This isn't survival, it's barbarity. The words float this way and that, fragile as the hope they cling to. With the heat returning after the storm, the men rally, searching the horizon for vessels, a mere glimpse to shatter their isolation. "Keep your eyes sharp," a man bellows, desperation colouring his tone. But days bleed into one another. The sun's unforgiving rays scorch their skin, blistering and peeling. The scent of burnt flesh mingles with the salt. Each day melds into a monotonous cycle of thirst and despair. They can think of little else. "Rations?" one asks, looking at the meagre supplies. The silence that falls is deafening. They count their rations like notes on a piano, each zero translating into another day longer than the last. They speak among themselves, voices hushed, contemplating darkness. "If it comes down to it," one starts, but no one wants to finish the thought. It's an unspoken truth hanging heavy, gnawing at their sense of humanity. As the sun sets, painting the sky crimson, an unsettling stillness blankets the ocean. There's no rustle in the water, no birds crying out, just silence. Reality crashes down on them as they realize they're utterly alone. What horrors await them on this uncharted path? They can hardly bear to consider it. The ocean, once a source of life, has become a daunting wilderness full of doubt. Each creak of the boat reminds them that their fight isn't just against hunger, but against an unfathomable expanse that promises nothing but despair. And then, shivers of fear run down their spines. A shadow moves beneath the water. An instinctual dread grips them. "What was that?" someone whispers, voice trembling once more. The horizon stretches unnaturally empty. They're left with this chilling question as they stare into the abyss, one that chills to the bone. Are they truly alone? The darkness of the ocean gnashes its teeth. The next storm may not be the weather, and they will need each other more than ever. Chapter 7. Isolation, the weight of loneliness. The air is thick with salt and desperation. Driftwood surrounds them, haunting reminders of what they've lost. The lifeboats, so fragile against the endless swell of the ocean, bob slightly, a cruel dance with the waves. Each rise and fall feels like the rhythm of a heartbeat, keeping time with their fading hopes. Around them, despair festers. It gnaws at the edges of their sanity. The men, once vibrant and eager, now wear faces etched with a raw mixture of fear and resignation. Shadows stretch longer, hours blur into days. The sun scorches relentlessly, but they are too tired to care about the burning of their skin. Their lips crack, and every word spoken is a painful effort. "I had a dream," whispers Matthew, his voice barely rising above the hush of the sea. "I saw land, green hills." He trails off as his eyes drift to the horizon, where the sun sinks low in a blood-orange sky. "Did you see civilization too?" John replies dryly, but there's a flicker of hope clinging to his sarcasm. His tone cuts through the bleakness, but doesn't quite dispel it. Isolation turns them against themselves. As the sun sets, the chill creeps in. The temperature drops sharply, and the darkness settles like a suffocating blanket. Men huddle together, sharing body heat, yet the distance between them grows. Each man is lost in his own solitude. They can speak, but fear grips their hearts. The ocean is vast, the stars indifferent. They have each other, but it's not the comfort it once was. The camaraderie feels strained under the weight of survival. They are bound together by misfortune, but their minds drift farther apart. Bonding moments dissolve into uncomfortable silence. "Remember when we thought we could outrun the horizon?" whispers Charles, looking down at his trembling hands. "How foolish we were." The wind carries his words away, leaving an awkward void. Each man contemplates his own choices. Regrets fill the spaces where laughter should be. Nights stretch endlessly. The harsh sound of waves crashing echoes, a constant reminder of their peril. Each crash is a heartbeat, a beat that thuds ominously against the hull of their small vessel. The night is peppered with the sound of muffled sobs, stifled cries for home that remain unheard. "We've got to keep our spirits up," says Thomas, his voice strained yet determined. He tries to instill hope, though he can see the weariness in their eyes. His words are desperate, a flimsy thread trying to hold them together. But the bleakness weighs heavier each day. Food runs low, and the men grow gaunt. Their bodies, once strong, now begin to show signs of the toll of their predicament. The smell of sweat and salt seeps into their clothes, mingling with the faint odor of decay. Isolation is their prison. They can't escape the reality of their situation. They sit in a circle, sharing stale dreams as if they were food, clinging to their last remnants of humanity. The sanctity of their friendships battles against the gnawing hunger. "I always thought I'd die a hero," says James, a man who used to share stories of valor. Now his bravado falls flat, mere dust collecting on the weight of despair. "Not like this, not here." His confession hangs in the air. A collective sigh echoes among them, a sound of loss that resonates deeply. They've lost more than their ship, they're losing themselves. Isolation is an executioner, and it knows them well. On the fourth night, hallucinations take root. The moon is a ghastly face sneering down at them, mocking their plight. John stares up, eyes glazed. "Look, there's a ship," he cries, pointing frantically at a distant shadow. Hope flares like kindling before being snuffed out. "It's just the fog, John," Matthew says, but there's a flicker of uncertainty in his voice. They all want to believe. They need salvation. The more they drift, the more they slip into madness. Their bonds fray, haunted by each other's presence. Too close for comfort, too distant for solace. "We can share our rations, keep each other fed," they say, but their eyes betray them. Beneath the thin veneer of camaraderie lies the instinct for survival. One morning, they wake to the sun filtering through thick clouds, a ghostly light. It illuminates the truth. They are wasting away, bodies weakening, spirits fading, isolation a shroud enveloping them tighter. "You've changed," Charles mutters to John, a hint of accusation in his tone. "I don't recognize you anymore." John recoils. As if struck, he turns away. The delicate balance of their friendship teeters. They know that in this ocean, the enemy is not just the sea, it's each other. "Just yesterday, I thought I heard the sound of a boat," Thomas admits, voice trembling. But the others don't share his revelation. They are too deep in their own spirals of despair. With every sunrise, their resolve weakens, hope wanes like the tide. They spend another day drifting, floating in purgatory. The horizon taunts, an unreachable promise that hangs just beyond sight. As darkness descends once again, the cold wraps around them. Frozen breaths hang in the air like whispers of lost dreams. The vastness swallows their words. No one sleeps. They lie awake, eyes darting, haunted by their thoughts. "Tell me a story," implores James, desperation creeping into his tone. "Anything." "About what?" Matthew snaps back, exhaustion in his voice. "Anything? Or something that's real?" "Something that used to be," James replies softly. It's an entreaty for humanity, a grasp at familiarity amidst chaos. But silence settles, a heavy weight, oppressive and cold. The only sound is the relentless crash of water against wood. They are alone together, marooned by their isolation. Then the tension splinters. An argument sparks, igniting the fragile atmosphere. "You think you know what we need?" John snaps, his voice raised in anger. "We are beyond your stories." The men shift uncomfortably, each wondering if they will be the next to snap. "Enough," Matthew's voice booms, breaking the rising tide of conflict. They stare at him, his harshness juxtaposed with the softness of their situation. They need direction, but his power is slipping. As they retreat into their own corners of despair, a silent question lingers. How much longer can they survive this mad drift? Days turn to weeks, sanity frays like tattered sails. With each passing moment, hope becomes a ghost, leaving behind spectres of loneliness that seep into their bones. In the distance, the horizon remains indifferent, and then, a glimmer, a distant light flickering at the edge of their reality. It could be salvation, or a siren's call to further madness. But what if it isn't? What if the darkness holds more treachery than they can imagine? With hearts pounding, they drift closer to the truth, each man on the fragile edge of hope and despair. And in that liminal space, where isolation reigns, they must decide what price they will pay to reclaim their humanity. Chapter 8. Hope on the Horizon, Rescued at Last. The horizon is painted in shades of gold and crimson. The sun clings to the edge of the world, casting long shadows on the surface of the water. Days blend into nights, and yet this one feels different. It's the scent of salt and life, just beneath the relentless stench of desperation aboard the lifeboats. The survivors squint against the dazzling light, hearts pounding with a mingling of hope and disbelief. Could it be true? "Land," a voice breaks through the fog of fatigue. It's Thomas, his voice rough, yet laced with a spark of fervour. The other men stare at him, sunken eyes wide with longing. "Are you certain?" whispers Owen, throat dry from salt and despair. "Look," Thomas gestures wildly, pointing to a distant blip against the endless blue, a sliver of land, perhaps an illusion, but in that moment it is everything. Fishing lines and empty tins are forgotten. The rhythm of desperation is replaced by an electric tension. Each man grips the sides of the boat, knuckles white, hearts racing as they pull themselves to their feet, swaying with the waves. The sun's heat is insistent, the residual chill of the ocean wind biting their skin. But in that moment, they are oblivious to any discomfort. Hours feel like days as they drift closer, the tantalizing outline of land slowly solidifying against the horizon. It's not much, just a jagged strip of coastline, but it is the promise of salvation. "Do you see it?" Joseph looks at the others, a crack of emotion in his voice. "We're going home." Bittersweet hope blooms within them. Images of their families flicker in their minds, ghostly and elusive. Wives, children, loved ones, all those faces distorted by time and torment. Would they be waiting? As they glide over the undulating waves, the fatigue of 3 months weighs heavily on their limbs. Each man's mind toils under the burden of survival. The taste of salt lingers, but the thought of fresh water dances like a spark in their souls. When they approach the land, adrenaline surges through their veins. The unmistakable sound of distant shouts reaches their ears. "Over here, over here," a voice carries across the wild expanse of ocean. The survivors rally, hoisting makeshift oars that scrape against the little lifeboat. They direct the vessel toward the sound, pushing through the surf, lungs burning as they scream shouts of their own. As they finally come ashore, wet sand squelches beneath their feet, a stark contrast to the hard surface of the decks they knew too well. When they step onto land, it feels surreal. For a brief moment, they are awash in disbelief, as if the ground beneath them might vanish into nothingness. But no, the earth is real. It holds them, whispers, "Welcome back." Cheers erupt from a group of fishermen on the beach, eyes wide in shock, then disbelief. They rush forward, gripped by the sight of these ragged, hollow-eyed men. "God have mercy," one shouts, the scent of smoke and wood smoke mixing with the salt of the ocean air. "What happened to you?" A wave of emotions crashes over the survivors, relief, gratitude, and an overwhelming urge to collapse. "Please, water," Thomas gasps, clutching his throat, salt-filled memories rushing back like the tide. Fishermen rush to fulfill their urgent need, pouring fresh water over cracked lips, their faces edged with concern. Small moments of humanity flicker amid the chaos. "Where are the others?" another survivor asks, but the group falls silent, haunted by the faces of lost brothers, their memories still fresh like shadows in their minds. The fishermen exchange worried glances, the weight of the moment hanging heavily in the air. Days pass as they recuperate. For the first time, they find themselves in warm beds, drowning in dreams of ordinary life, of bread, laughter, and children's voices. The horror of the Essex seems like a dark tunnel receding into the distance. Yet uncertainty lingers. What awaits them back in civilization? The fear of being branded as lost men, the rumors that would swirl around their ordeal. Conversations spark and fade like fragile flames. "She was a fine ship," Joseph reminisces one night, the glow of a small fire illuminating the contours of his face. "She deserved better than this." "You can say that again," Owen replies, the ghost of a smile creeping onto his lips before it vanishes. Shadows from the past bob and weave in their rest. Nightmares claw at the edges of their peace, but they hold on to the warmth, the camaraderie forged in the depths of their despair. The locals tirelessly provide warmth and sustenance, the nights filled with laughter and stories, sometimes healing, sometimes haunting. They speak of loss and of the ocean's unyielding nature. A mutual understanding forms between the survivors and the fishermen. However, the reality of their situation casts a long shadow. Rumors spread, whispers of their ordeal reach the ears of those in power. After weeks of silence, a ship tasked with the recovery of the remaining survivors approaches the shore. A sense of dread intertwines with relief. Are they ready to confront the ghosts of their past? One morning, the air feels thick with anticipation. The ship looms ever closer, its sails like wings spread wide against the harbour. It is an emissary of their former lives, and yet it is also a reminder of everything they have lost. As they step aboard, the familiar sense of rigging and salt mingle with the unsettled emotions roiling within them. "Brace yourselves," Thomas murmurs to his fellow survivors, his voice barely audible over the creaking wood of the ship. "It won't be easy." The men stand in silence, the weight of what lies ahead settling heavily upon them. They might have left the water behind, but it never truly leaves someone unscathed. The ship's engines rumble to life. A tension holds the crew in more place, their gazes stealing glances at one another. Questions swirl in the air as they cut through the waves, closing the distance to familiar shores. How will they tell their stories? Will anyone believe them? And as the coast begins to draw near, a thought presses against their minds like a storm. What if this new reality proves to be even more treacherous than the one they have just escaped? The land ahead seems both inviting and foreboding. Their hearts quicken with each passing moment. What awaits them in the embrace of civilization? As the shoreline rushes forward into focus, the survivors stand on the precipice of the unknown. One thing is certain, they will never forget the sea. But the question hangs in the air like a storm cloud. What darkness still lingers in the depths, hidden beneath the surface? Chapter 9. The Aftermath. The Stories of the Survivors. The light is harsh against the pale skin of the rescued crew. Ben and the others emerge from the cramped, stinking hold of the hunting ship that pulled them from the icy grip of despair. Salt crusts their lips, skin taut and peeling. Lungs burn from a mixture of brine and the echoes of their screams. "Get them below," shouts a crewman, urgency etched on his face. They shove Ben and his companions forward, but their eyes glass over as they scan the horizon, haunted. Nothing but water stretches infinitely. Even now, the ocean mutters its secrets, refusing to let the dead rest. Once back on land, the survivors face a world that feels foreign. Faces pass them on the streets of Nantucket. Friends and family search for recognition, but all they see are ghosts. Men attempt feeble smiles, but their eyes tell a different story. Nightmares twist behind their closed lids. The smell of roasted coffee is overpowering, thick, but it cannot mask the stench of death that lingers in their minds. "Tell me what happened," a reporter presses, notebook poised like a guillotine. Ben looks down, thoughts spiraling. "We were lost," he mutters, bracing himself against the wall. "People, they just kept disappearing." The taste of ash fills his mouth, every breath a reminder of his comrades. Simeon, who tried to keep hope alive with tales of their safe return, now lost to the depths. Unable to fight the feelings, Ben turns away, the echo of his friend's laughter still ringing in his ears. Days stretch into weeks. The Essex crew members try to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. But each night they gather, they can't escape the whispers of what happened at sea. Jack, with his shaggy hair now streaked with grey, sits in a local tavern, the scent of sweat and stale ale hanging thick in the air. His hands tremble as he raises a glass. "To those we lost," he says, his voice cracking against the weight of their memories. "Aye," the others echo, but the toast feels hollow. One too many men are missing. Jack's heart grips with the easy, sudden reminder of Simeon, how he gripped a lifeboat, eyes wide, knowing what loomed ahead. Time doesn't heal, it just deepens the wounds. Their shared guilt festers, sending echoes of that night back into the forefront of their minds. A weight is settled on their chests like the devil himself, heavy and unshakable. It's not long before whispers of insanity plague the men. The town can't understand. Local women talk behind closed doors, expressing concern as Jack and Ben tumble further into their private hells. "This isn't what we signed up for," Ben whispers one night, staring into a flickering candle. We were meant to hunt whales." Jack stares at the flame, flickering, uncertain. If I close my eyes, I can still see them. The faces of the lost dance in the shadows. Their laughter haunts him, mockingly taunting their sacrifices. The cycle of despair spirals deeper. Jack turns to rum, seeking warmth in empty bottles. Each drink momentarily douses. The chill that creeps through his bones, the icy memory of the ocean's bite. He sits alone, pretending he can drown the ghosts that tug at his soul, but in drunken stupor they surface. The murmurs grow louder. "Think they'll start to speak?" a guy asks over the bar, smirking with morbid curiosity. "The men from the Essex. They're just wrecks now, drinking away their guilt." Ben overhears. The grip of shame tightens around his heart. "We survived," he shouts suddenly, words hoarse from disuse. People turn, their eyes wide. "You don't know what we lost. You don't know what it means to breathe till the salt water burns your lungs." Time marches on. In the fall, Ben finds himself walking through town, a chill biting through his coat. Leaves rustle like whispers beneath his feet. The once vibrant colours are muted, the world dulled. He stops and watches a child playing with a wooden toy, laughter spilling into the air. Joy is foreign now. "I heard your ship went down," a voice behind him says. It's one of the townsfolk, an old man with a knowing gaze. "They say you're cursed." "Cursed? No," Ben bites back, frustration boiling. "We were survivors." The man's face softens, lines deepening with age. "Aye, but at what cost? Tell me what haunts you. I want to understand." Ben hesitates. The truth is volatile. They never came back. The crew. We tried to save each other. The hunger. The desperation. He stops, shaking his head. "I lost men. We all did," the old man says quietly. "Tell it. You'll find the burden lighter." But storytelling is a fragile act. Each word is a shackle. The scenes unfurl in Ben's mind. The cold metal of the oars, the soft ripples that became violent waves. He recalls the moment Simeon, in madness, gripped his face. "We'll find land, won't we, Ben?" His desperate eyes drilled into Ben, and in that moment he understood. Hope lost meant surrender. Days turning into months, but it isn't enough. Their war with memory never ceases. Fractured moments haunt Ben in sleepless nights. The taste of seawater, sharp and bitter, fills his mouth at dawn. The creaking of a boat moves across his ears, even when he is still. Jack tries to reach out. "Let's go whale watching, eh?" he suggests, but the thought sends ice through Ben's veins. "You want to go back to the sea? That's where our nightmares lie." "Sometimes you have to face it," Jack offers, voice trembling. But the fear of drowning is still too fresh, too raw. One evening, under a bleak grey sky, Jack disappears into the labyrinth of his own mind. Friends talk of him like he's a spectre. "He was never right after the rescue," they murmur, a familiar disdain hiding in their remarks. Ben watches him slip away, lost on the land he once loved. What could he say to reach him? "Jack, you must fight this." But Jack just stares into the abyss, where hope has ceased to exist. As winter claws its way into Nantucket, the winds whip through the streets, carrying stories of the sea. The men gather, their voices low, discussing the actions of a captain who led them into disaster. How could he let the Essex fall? One night, shivering in shadows, Jack mumbles, "The blame must lie somewhere." But self-doubt lingers. An unending storm brews within, twisting his insides. Soon thoughts turn darker, clouding their minds, spiraling towards the edges of sanity. And it is in those moments of vulnerability, while huddled together over a flickering candle, that Ben uncovers the truth. "What if we meet the end?" he whispers, barely audible. "What if our souls never truly returned?" Silence blankets the group, thick and suffocating. In the fragile aftermath of survival, they tremble on the precipice of despair, their hearts echoing the ghostly waves of the past. The next day, Ben hears that Jack is gone. No one knows where he vanished, just a faint outline against the pale morning mist. The news floods in, quick and disorienting, another ghost to add to their collection. What did happen on that fateful voyage? What's left unsaid still echoes in their minds. In the darkest grip of winter, Ben stands at the edge of the docks, staring into the churning grey waters. "Is this it?" he murmurs, a quiet question swallowed by the ocean's roar. A figure catches his eye in the distance. Skinny Sam, a once lively crew member, now gaunt and hollow-eyed, mumbling about saving the remnants of the Essex. A chill runs down Ben's spine. What if the past never truly releases its hold? What if the men of the Essex remain forever haunted? Suddenly, a shriek cuts through the air. Fear lurches in his gut. He squints at the waves crashing against the rocks. The sound again, the cry of something lost, something desperate. What lives beneath the surface? Their stories aren't over, not yet. A reckoning awaits. Something stirs in the depths of the sea, beckoning with a siren's call. Ben stares into the churning water, dread curling around him. The past is alive, and it wants to be heard. Chapter 10. Legacy of the Essex. The impact on whaling and maritime law. The sun rises slowly over the Pacific Ocean, casting a warm glow on the restless waters. But the waves here carry whispers of a tragedy long buried beneath the surface. The wreck of the Essex is more than a mere shipwreck. It's a wound that reshaped the very fabric of whaling and maritime law. When the survivors of the Essex were finally rescued, their ordeal sparked outrage. The story spread like wildfire, igniting conversations in taverns, shipyards, and parlours. The smell of rum mixed with despair as men gathered to hear the accounts of death, cannibalism, and unimaginable loss. "They did what they had to do," one man murmured, shaking his head. Another replied, "But at what cost?" Before the Essex, whaling was a brutal but relatively straightforward business. The ocean was a vast expanse, largely untouched by regulation. Captains answered only to themselves, and the ships sailed with an air of invincibility. The icy winds whispered secrets of danger, but greed often drowned out caution. Men felt invulnerable, believing they could conquer the sea. But the harrowing tale of the Essex turned that invincibility to dust. Whaling ships were suddenly seen as floating coffins. The stories of those who drifted for weeks on end became cautionary tales. "We can no longer ignore the risks," one ship owner lamented as he shuffled his papers in a dimly lit office, cigarette smoke curling around his head like a noose. Laws began to take shape, drafted in the wake of calamity. Maritime safety codes emerged from anxious discussions, fueled by fear and a desire for reform. The stench of fish and salt air filled the legislative chambers as lawmakers feverishly debated the merits of a new code. "We cannot let this happen again," a senator declared. "No more lives lost to negligence." As whispers of the Essex faded into echoes, the law evolved. The result was a concerted effort to prioritize the safety of crews. Lifeboats became a mandatory requirement. Inspection protocols were established. A new era dawned, one where the lives of sailors were held with greater reverence than ever before. But the ink of the new laws was not yet dry when the first test came. On a brisk fall day in 1847, the returning whalers were alerted to a distress signal, another ship in peril. The air felt electric with anxiety. Would they rise to the occasion or repeat the ingrained mistakes of the past? Some of the new rules were accepted, while others were scoffed at. "Too much regulation will ruin us," a skeptical captain warned during a gathering of seasoned whalers. "The sea is not made for timid men." There was a tension in the air, a storm threatening to break. These men had earned their place in a tradition steeped in danger, yet irrevocably altered now by the Essex. Soon, the industries began to feel the weight of regulation seep into their very marrow. Insurance. Companies changed their policies, demanding stricter compliance with safety measures. The cries of families who lost loved ones echoed in every chamber of commerce. "Our husbands, our sons, we will not forget," a grieving widow spoke at a meeting, her voice rising with the tide of collective sorrow. The culture of whaling transformed. Fishermen became less aggressive. They started to practice more caution and respect for both their crews and the ocean, yet whispers of temptation hung in the air. "The whales are still out there," an eager young hunter proclaimed. "A fortune lies waiting." But the new law instilled a fear underlying every chase. The tales of hunger and desperation worsted through the nets of hope. Each sinking ship that fled the safety of the shore brought back memories of the Essex. Images of rags and bones haunted the minds of even the most seasoned whalers. As these new practices took root, not everyone accepted the changes. A handful of captains took their chances, their grim determination a siren call to those eager for wealth. They ignored the stories swirling among the waves, convinced they were invincible. "We can beat the storm," one of them laughed defiantly, staring out at churning clouds that loomed on the horizon. But fate has a way of reminding us of our fragility. Those who sailed boldly on the crest of arrogance began to encounter their own misfortunes. Disasters sparked debates in taverns, where men gathered around flickering candlelight, pondering who was to blame. Was it the ocean's fury or their own reckless hearts? And still, in the hearts of men, the ghost of the Essex lingered. Its legacy carved deep scratches in the psyche of whalers who had once believed only in their conquest of the sea. For every drop of whale oil, there was a reminder. Anxiety replaced bravado, caution overshadowed greed. How long would the industry hold these memories? Just a few years down the line, many began to forget the teachings of calamity. A younger generation emerged, driven by the allure of riches, willing to gamble their lives against the violent tides. They got lucky, they'd sneer. "We've got what it takes." Simultaneously, survivors of the Essex became reluctant symbols of legend and caution. Their stories spread like wildfire, inspiring entire societies to consider the treatment of shipwreck survivors. Public sentiment shifted, a compassion previously reserved for the crew now extended to all mariners. It was during these discussions that maritime law began to reshape itself once again. The once distant concept of rescue and abandonment turned into a rallying cry for humanitarian efforts. No man should ever be left to die at sea, an advocate fervently declared, rallying support for rules that guaranteed aid would be given to all stranded seafarers. As the years wore on, debates regarding the treatment of survivors intensified. A court case gained national attention when a ship's captain refused help to men stranded from another vessel. The atmosphere was thick with tension, arguments echoing like clashing swords. "The sea has its own rules," the captain coldly stated, but the public would have none of it. The public sentiment was powerful, swaying opinions, driving laws forward. Justice for those left behind became as much a societal expectation as it was a legal mandate. There was a palpable shift. Every ship that set sail now carried with it a sacred trust, the right to return. But at what price? Just as the memory of the Essex faded into history, the tentacles of its legacy gripped the industry tighter. The profits continued to tempt those who would ignore the very lessons left in the wreckage. The water churned ominously, a reminder of both progress and peril. The echoes of the past warned against the perils of forgetting, and as the shipyards hummed with new energy, one question lingered: would the industry respect the spirit of the Essex, or would men's greed blind them once more? In the depths of the ocean, the ghost of the Essex remains. It waits, watching the waves wash over a new generation of sailors, waiting for them to repeat the fatal mistakes of the past. Conclusion: lessons from the Essex. As the icy waves swallowed the remains of the Essex, they took with them not just timber and sailcloth, but the very essence of human ambition, frailty, and despair. This ship, a seemingly indomitable force against the raging ocean, became a theatre of horror, leaving its survivors with scars deeper than the flesh. Each man who battled the elements would carry the weight of his companion's fates, a lasting imprint engraved in their hearts and minds. The tale of the Essex resonates far beyond its tragic end. It compels us to confront the darkest corners of the human experience. What remnants of hope are left when survival teeters on the brink of madness? The harrowing choices faced by these men illuminate the brutal truth of desperation. They were transformed, not just by hunger or exposure, but by the primal struggle to exist against insurmountable odds. The chilling whispers of their ordeal echo through time, cautioning us about the fragility of civility when stripped bare by nature's ferocity. As we draw the cloak of history over the Essex, we are reminded that this was not just a journey across treacherous waters, but an exploration of the fortress and ruin embedded within mankind. The very same spirit that pushed them into the depths of the Pacific also haunted them, urging them to confront their most profound fears. The lessons are stark. Resilience can often tip into recklessness, and the will to survive can forge paths of unimaginable horror. Consider the fate of those men. Each choice they made, born from the desperate need to cling to life, teaches us about the moral dilemmas that arise when pushed to the limit. In those lifeboats, floating amid endless water, the ocean was both a source of life and a predator lurking just beneath the surface. The suffocating silence that accompanied their despair speaks to us, the living, offering a grim reminder of how quickly humanity can dissolve in the face of ruthless nature. This legacy, etched in the annals of maritime tragedy, stirs something deep within us, urging reflection on our own lives. What lengths would we go to when faced with oblivion? What would we sacrifice for survival? As history weaves its tapestry, the threads of the Essex remind us that, while we may rise from darkness, we are also deeply shaped by it. And so, as we conclude, the haunting legacy of the Essex lingers like a storm cloud, reminding us that even in times of light, shadows will remain. Every shiver of wind, every crash of waves, serves as a testimony to those lost at sea, and those forever changed by their ordeal. If this history has left its mark on you, leave a like. It tells me you survived the sea journey. Drop a comment below. I want to know what part of this story haunted you most, and let the darkness guide you to what lies ahead. In our next exploration, we will traverse the desolate paths once walked by the grim reapers of war in the World War II trenches, where valor and despair intermingle like smoke in the air. Join us, if you dare.